titled Core Continuum, Value Leakage and Proactive Shift. So we are going to focus on the overall, how the drugs are discovered, where the AI is used, and how it gets to finally the patient hand, and how are you utilizing the AI in there. So I have speakers from Gilead, Yusuf. Can you give up on us? Great. So Yusuf is representing basically early discovery. Sorry, getting my house together. So Yusuf is representing us early drug discovery area, introducing DTech innovation, and then we have Contiuum. Oh great, he's here. He's also representing the early stage. He's into drug development. Sandeep is from Precision Neuromet. Sorry, I missed. Yusuf from Gilead. And then we have Girish, who's presenting the healthcare from Sutter Health. And then finally we have Sam from Doxpera, whose company is focused on utilizing the data in the surgical field, how to make that more efficient process. So there is a justification for the payers and the insurance company. So I will let them introduce themselves a little bit, and then we'll get more into the discussion as we go along. And one thing to think about is we have the AI implementation everywhere, whether it's a drug discovery, or whether it's a hospital, or whether it's final to the patient. But the issue is there's always the data leak in between, the leakage in between, the value leakage. How do we utilize this, the data set, and how do we make this better for the human being? That's what we are going to be focusing on. So with that, I'll let Yusuf introduce a little bit himself. So Yusuf, share with us, where are you utilizing the AI, and where do you think the early stage startup should focus on?
Thank you so much for having me, and it's great to be back. I was in the first version of tech here at TieCon, and I'm very glad actually that I got a promotion as a Chief AI Officer. So that's not my title, but I really appreciate the attention here. So I am the head of AI Research Center. It's a team that I built almost 18 months now at Gilead, coming from Genentech, where I was leading AI for operations, commercial, medical affairs, and government affairs. I am a computational and applied mathematics engineer by training. Don't ask me today what does that mean, but all I know is it's something that I really liked and I still like doing every day. Coming to your question, do you want the GPT Claude answer,
yes,
or you use that question?
So
I give you the choice.
I'll comment to that, your comment about the title that was to be all volunteers.
Oh.
So the information doesn't travel between the different volunteers.
Yeah, I'll take it, no worries.
I know we are talking
Absolutely,
about
thanks so much. Yeah, I think across, again, I'm gonna try to give like a broad, industry-wide insights. Obviously, Gilead is part of it, and I just came back from a trip to New York where I was attending the AWS Life Sciences Symposium. Very, very insightful, so there are a lot of things that I learned there. So, where do we see defensible or defendable ROI? So across the industry, across life sciences, I would say top 3, top 4 that is current and trending, and not just trending, and you will know why in a second, is definitely regulatory submissions. There is one number that struck me always here in the United States. 3.5 to 5% of the GDP is being spent in bureaucracy in healthcare, documentation. So I will let you sit with that number a little bit. The other area is site selection and patient identification. Very, very important. a lot of studies fail because of enrollment, and you know that. The third area is biomarkers certification, respondent, non-respondent. I think that's extremely important because we move from I would say, a single analysis to a multivariate and multimodal analysis. And there is also, I would say, in addition to regulatory site selection and patient identification, there is one area that is perhaps a little bit confusing for some. Some people call it digital twins. I don't like that term, to be honest. I rather call it like external arms or synthetic arms, because it allows you to simulate, and I'm talking under the control of the MDs here, simulate different arms with different dosing mechanisms for a given compound. So I will double click on two areas. So let's talk about site selection and patient identification. And I'm going to talk about money, though it's not about cost, it's really about timing. So I think the AI promise here for site selection and patient identification is, let's say, 12, maybe 15 to 20% lift in enrollment, and also a reduction in the timing in enrollment. And I think, let's say, 12 months perhaps saved. Think about it as 400 million plus in NPV, net value. Okay, so now we touch the pocket, so it becomes very, very important. And the second example is with regulatory submissions and medical writing, and this is something that at Gilead also we really pay attention to, and we got a huge acceleration thanks to our CIO, and I think you heard her talk, Anna Osberg. And for me, regulatory is, there are different assumptions, but let's simplify it. Let's say just from DBL, database lock, to submission. So every month compressed in this is around, let's say, 60 million in PV. And you know, and you understand now I love NPV because and PTRS, these are the two metrics, at least I hold my team accountable to improve in the life cycle of drug development. There are a lot of people who are very, very ambitious in the industry that say, hey, I'm gonna go from months to 6 weeks submission timeline, from DBL to submissions. But I think, honestly, like a very decent one, I would say, if you go from 6 to 9 months to something like 6 and 8 weeks, that's already a good target. And there are like different areas of benefit. I'm not going to list all of them, but to be honest, what I realize is that the least glorious things in drug development, which is very repetitive, very cumbersome, which is medical writing, with all due respect to medical writers, is where the value is, an immediate value. And back to the discovery, we have to be super careful. It's not that AI is not doing anything in drug discovery, and we have all smart people, tech people developing product. It's more of, it's still, I would say, aspirational and promising, but operations and execution in the life cycle of development, it's already in production. There are things happening, and that's what I learned a couple of weeks ago talking to peers as well.
So where do you see the gaps, which pharma companies are looking for, and they're entrepreneurs in this audience, where they can talk?
I see gaps everywhere, to be honest with you. And I think the one thing that I learned throughout, I can't believe it actually, so almost 2 decades doing mathematics and data things, technology is never the problem, to be honest with you. I think the gaps is the silos in decision making, and I'll give you a very recent example that I came across to build patient 360 or patient journeys. When you are in a review committee for your pipeline or assets, or let's say a portfolio committee where you have all the assets, well, you have commercial people who look at the, go from pure commercial data, right? Market data, and then you have real world evidence people looking at it from post-market, and then you have clean dev from protocol design data points, and then you have clean ops people looking at it from logistics point. But can we just have like the same data in the middle and try to say whether we go for phase 1, phase 2, or phase 3? So these are the things. I mean, very. Someone talked about interoperability. It's very easy in French. And interoperability, and I think it's you, Stephanie. I think yeah, it's true. We need to make sure that if you ask yourself this question, if your molecule or your team actually is trying to find data for a given molecule, and what is the time they spend from finding a relationship between phase 2, let's say, and phase 3 for the same molecule? If the answer is more than 0 from timing perspective, you have a huge problem, because the molecule does not care about the silos, even less patience. So basically we have to talk, and I think we're going to talk about governance and all this. I don't want to anticipate that.
Great, thank you. So I feel that we need to have a template approach available. So on the same note, I guess, Sandeep, I'll ask you, being in the startup environment, being a physician, what are the challenges you are seeing? What are you looking for from the technologists, from the entrepreneur to help you to expedite your drug development process and then bring it to the market?
Yeah, thanks. So I'm Sandeep Kumar. I'm actually a neurosurgeon for 25 years at UCSF in the Department of Neurosurgery, focus on CNS therapeutics. And precision neuromedicine started a couple of years ago with the concept of we've developed really good symptomatic treatments for CNS diseases, but nothing have we done to be able to modify those diseases. And I think we're now entering an era where we can actually stop the progression of diseases and actually modify and give really patient-true outcomes. But to do that, we need, a complex of things, including, one of the things we're trying to develop is a digital twin, because it's not just the biology of the drug, it's how we deliver the drug, and can we customize and do precision delivery of drugs into the brain, which is validated by an AI model, looking at an MRI scan of the patient, looking at physics-based fluid dynamics. So PINS, for example, is very well suited for deep learning, and this is in physics-based models, and combining that with the more traditional, AI algorithms to be able to look at metadata and combining it together. And the purpose of the digital twin is really to help expedite it to physicians. In the end, there's no question our focus is on patients, but we have so much technologies that they forget. If you're not going direct to patient, you're going direct to consumer, or direct to the surgeon or the physician. If it's not going to make it easier for me, if it unloads my cognitive load, if it makes me more efficient, if it's more cost savings for me, or has a dramatic improvement for patients, then yes, it's something I'm going to implement. So much technology comes to us that we just say, no, I'll keep doing what I'm doing because it's a small value to the patient, or it's going to complicate my life, or there's really no added value. So I think you have to think about who your true user is. Yes, the patient may be the actual outcome that you're trying to achieve, and for the FDA, that's the definite goal, but it's user. So we're very user-centric. For us, it's going to be surgical-based drug delivery, so we're trying to make it customized so surgeons can, with the digital twin, we can model it, and you sort of morph images of the patient to sort of look at these parameters of imaging, stage of disease, biology, clinical protocols, to be able to allow surgeons to really quickly say, it's like GPS, these are the 3 options, this is the option that makes the most sense. Surgeons can do it, or physicians can do it. It's just very complicated. It's time consuming. But if we can have those models, represented to us, that could make it more scalable. And we talked about democratization earlier on. Now we're eliminating the user experience from this. Whether you get treatment in Nebraska or Boston shouldn't make a difference. And how do we do that? How do we take that out? Is to give the surgeons or to give the physicians these opportunities to be able to look at these insights.
Definitely, I guess you was looking for making his life comfortable to take things up there. So on the same note, I guess, Girish, for you are in clinic, you're dealing with patients, you're adapting to this new technology. How are you managing all these challenges while still treating the patient and getting the trust? Patients are also happy with that.
Can you hear me? So I'm the executive medical director for cardiac services at Palo Alto Medical Foundation. In a prior life, I was also an entrepreneur in medical devices. I think the issue of trust is super important. I think, number one, there's some very basic things that we have to ensure when we implement any of these technologies, right? Data security, we have to have patient consent, and we have to make sure any of these suggested technologies works, right? Trust, I think, in healthcare is not an on-off type of thing. It really is a process, right? And changing clinical workflows, changing or adopting new technology is a very slow, iterative process that builds on years of data, experience, people feeling comfortable with the item, feeling comfortable with the science, having physicians understand why it works, how it works, and really seeing trial data that this works, this is helpful. I think in the role of AI, or in the specific case of AI, people also want to see it work in their neck of the woods, in their particular situation, right? I think there are a lot of, in at least clinical operations, I'm not talking about other areas, models are there, models are very great and interesting, and they make good publishable studies, but does it work in all populations? Does it work without bias? Can it iterate on itself? Can it actually help me in my clinic? Right? So that aspect of trust is super important. Otherwise, the AI adoption is going to fail. And there are several other reasons that we can go into why that may fail or why people may not even get into the door. But I don't know if you want to address that later.
Sure. So now moving on to Sam, let's touch on the data moat. Everybody has been talking about it. How are you utilizing the data set, and how do you collect that, and what your predictive models are? Give us an idea of it.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Deepa. I'm Sam in Ethiopia. I'm the CEO, co-founder of Dexpera. We are a digital backbone to surgical procedural care. And we're deployed across 1,100 provider sites across the US, as large as Mayo, all the way down to regional ambulatory surgery centers. And just recently, we just launched our office in Europe. We just did our massive expansion in Australia and Europe, so it's been an interesting process. As you can see, there's a whole lot of different things going on. But from a data moat perspective, the way we look at it for us is that we're embedded within the workflow of the surgical process, not adjacent to it. We believe you have to embed yourself, and that whole purpose built is a big deal to it. And when we think about data for us is that for every case that comes to our platform, we think a lot more about the structure and the timestamp in each of it. And a lot of people don't think about telemetry of that data. We think about the scheduling, the patient readiness, interaction, all the things that are above beyond the EMR, the usage of the implant that's being put onto the patient, all the way down to the day of surgery execution. All that data is kept. And the way we think about it is now having to combine all that set of data, a defensibility to us is that's uniquely different for in comparison to others, is that we think about the context and the insights, not just the volume. And that's a big deal to us. And think about it, it's the way we think it reflects the actual what surgery is happening, not the information that's being documented inside the EMR. And that's how we think. And taking that data, for us from a technical perspective, we call that metadata. Metadata combined with our data. Now you have a full ability to build predictive optimization. So with one of the largest players that we play with, there's a large ambulatory surgery center network in the US that uses our platform. And the way they use it for predictive optimization. And they look at it to say, hey, we're seeing a pattern here that we could anticipate that there's going to be a massive cancellation of dislocation. We're going to have a lot of issues when it comes to equipment movements. And they use that as a way, as a cockpit to manage that effectively. And then the other part of it is it's also a kind of a closed, continuous improvement loop, which allows them to see, hey, every surgery that they have running through their system, they become a lot more efficient as they start to monitor the system. It learns itself throughout the continuous process. And at the end of the day, they're seeing massive ROI coming out of it. So they do this financial connection to that information that they get from it. And that's how we approach our problem set. As most people say that's boring, but operational intelligence is the most important piece of it.
Definitely. This is great. Thank you. I guess on the similar note, the question is, we're all collecting data. We all want templates. How do you really bridge the gap? How do you translate between different areas, whether it comes to users or whether
I think governance is definitely a key thing here, and I think the most successful companies will think alongside their AI governance, thinking about the data governance, and data governance, like learning from my colleagues in technology, and actually even from my past life, and believe it or not, I spent 10 years in IT, so that's a fun fact. About me, and I think having data stewards embedded in the business, people who can get your MDM right, so you're not looking for your little and data, labels and get your cataloging right. I think that's a good start. Yes, we are in a very regulated industry, and we have to be compliant. We have to go with the rules. But what I observed coming from other industries, I came from food industry, cosmetics, kudos to Dermasense, by the way, I liked what they're developing, from fashion. I think we tend to put those barriers in our minds, right? Because we could experiment things within the right frameworks, the governance frameworks, compliantly. I think really educating organizations to embed those data SMEs and not just focus on moving data around from pure data engineering standpoint, because oftentimes there are challenges where data engineering can create the best architecture, but I think you always need to pair them with data managers or perhaps like I said, data stewards. And all these things, by the way, are not known just to the business. The first time I heard this, it was from a colleague in IT, telling me, I said, how is the MDM doing? He said, how is the data stewards doing? Right? So we will really have to work hand in hand, and compliance or governance is not just a fan group that you put in place, but it's really a team sport, and it's a marathon. You have to be ready to take on that journey. And as you see, I didn't talk about technology yet.
So we just heard in the previous call that data is owned by the patient. So when you're collecting all this data, when patients come to the site and then you're collecting the data set, how do you make a good use of that? Or do you have to have a consent at the time before you share that data? How do you?
No, absolutely you have to have consent, but I'd like to take a step back, because data, when you start talking about its governance and use and all that, has already gotten too far down the road, right? As a physician, as a healthcare entity, you don't want large streams of data. Healthcare is particularly noisy. There's a lot of garbage data that comes. We want curated data. We want intelligence, right? A lot of our decisions are made on incomplete knowledge. And so this is where lots of times things fail, right? We don't want an email with 30 blood pressure readings, right? It's not useful or actionable. And so understanding a clinical workflow or deeply, so I always say, you should, as an aspiring entrepreneur or even, in AI, you should push away your keyboard. You should come into the clinic and first and foremost become kind of an anthropologist. You really have to sit and observe and live the workflows and understand what that problem is before you kind of start talking about all those things. And then you'll understand what is the technology or data or AI solution that you may want. Those are just tools. In fact, I would suggest that most of the tech stack you need to solve a lot of things already exists. It's never really a technology problem. It's usually understanding operations, understanding how to integrate well with workflows, like you were saying, and like Sandeep was saying, how to make the UI and usability of that product first and foremost. Sometimes it's a very simple thing. I mean, but you'd be amazed, if I have to, in a busy clinic, log on to another workstation, put my login there, or look up one more piece of data somewhere else, or things, I'm not using it. It just doesn't work.
I was going to say for entrepreneurs, perhaps one of the things, we use AI a lot for prediction algorithms, and what we're trying to do is sift the signal so it's really by doing this, we're using AI more as not as a standalone device, but really closing the loop between because you're right, for what we're working on, we're looking at imaging data, a lot of imaging data, a lot of biology, a lot of clinical outcomes, functional data, electrical signals as well. Combining all those together adds in more noise. And so if we can sort of really use it to make it more reproducible and more systematic, that I think is a good starting point. You have to have the infrastructure put in place initially, up front, because if it's not there, going back and doing it later on is very difficult to do. So going back to who owns the data and where it is I think there's no question we're developing a registry across all CNS diseases, but that can only be done with the consent. And so we're working in partnerships with a group in Germany, and of course we think HIPAA is bad. When you do work with GDRP, that's a whole different level, but that's really should be the standard, because again, they're very focused on it's the patient, it's the user who owns the data, not the company.
Just wanted to add on it. I think there was a really good process that's been talked about, and even the one panel that was before us. I think there's a lot of thought process on the data ownership, but I feel that there's also attention needs to be made on the usability, as what you said, and the interoperability, which was talked about a little bit more. And I think the constant thing that we see as a problem is that everyone talks about EMR interoperability being a challenge. I don't think that's the case. I think there is a lot more problems like operational and financial systems that already exist. And the crazy part that I've seen constantly across the table, and this is an indication for future entrepreneurs, is that if you're able to look at all the systems that are at the higher levels, the operational, the clinical, the financial systems, think about it, it's a big business of a hospital. And if you're able to layer those things together, because right now everything's happening in silos. Every decision is being in isolation without any of those alignments going on. So if they were all to be aligned together and you have more network systems, I could give many examples of how surgeons operate, because we spend a lot of time with them as what that's been the long decade of our life doing that. The one thing you'll see at the end of the day is you will constantly see that the more you connect this data, then you'll get to use the AI capability, because right now completely AI is still ineffective in the way you use it, because the data is not fully integrated in one component that you can make decisions. It's all human intervention that has to happen. So I would say interoperability, usability needs to come in that picture. And there should be incentives and policies to do that. And that's what I would support.
Thank you. So as we're getting very close to the happy hour, I don't want to be making everybody wait for us. So one last word of wisdom with respect to policies or governance we need to have in place. We'll start with you. What's your top spot? I know FDA has come up with the AI utilization policy.
Yeah.
Or anything else you want to share?
Well, I think for me, what I tell also my team, all the time, don't open multiple fronts at a time. So, like small bites. Start with something that is impactful for the patients, something that removes the waste. Because FDA is going nowhere. It will always be there. So basically, we're running against time. You don't have, especially in pharma, you don't have a lot of margin to tell you what they want, and okay, so go write the CSR, basically. So you don't have enough margin to reinvent the wheel. Let's put it this way. In certain therapeutic areas, like less predictive, for example, oncology, inflammation. Differently from virology, where you just count things in the blood. I think definitely the focus, solving one problem at the time, I think is very key, because then you have the end-to-end. I think finding the interdependencies between things like CSR that is on the critical path in submission, and link that to study startups, link that to site selection, link that to upstream. We talked about DBL to submissions, but link that also to TFLs and ACDTM. Really having the 360 view, or maybe 10,000 feet view, is very, very important, and stay grounded. I think that's what's very important. because AI is moving too fast. But we have to keep our feet on the ground.
Sandeep.
No, I think we did get our AI-driven biodistribution software FDA, which was a little challenge. It's not as much of a challenge getting a therapeutics code. So when you're dealing with therapeutics, everything else is a bit easier. But I think the FDA is coming around to the concept if you're using an assisted tool, I think this was mentioned earlier, it's much easier because, and that's what we always do, leave the final decision to the surgeon. There's no reason, it's like Tesla versus Waymo. You take the liability or not, but as an assistive tool, I think surgeons are more, or physicians are more willing to adopt this. But I think the AI algorithm, I think Tom said this earlier, is that what the FDA does not want is a data set that's based off of Caucasian males, because that's not going to be representative to be able to define the treatment algorithm for another patient who has a different racial background, different age background, different stage of disease background. So I think these implementations are now we're taking software and essentially making it a therapeutic, which adds in a whole different layer of complexity. But I think it's important because eventually, you're right, right now it's an assistive tool, but eventually it will be autonomous. And at that transition, we want to make sure it's robust.
I have two things. I mean, I think, there should really be no moat for data. I think it should be available to everyone, including physicians, and anonymized, and people should train on it, learn from it. And I think, obviously, FDA is actually thinking along these lines. They have now this sandbox initiative where, I think people can train on it, and I think that'll be a very positive step to inspire innovation. The second thing is to entrepreneurs in the room. Healthcare is funny because the ultimate user of your product may not be the one who pays for it. And who reimburses you for that may have absolutely no idea what the product is. And so you have to really understand the financial nuances, because if you don't, you may invent the best thing for the patient. And unfortunately, in our healthcare system, that may not get reimbursed.
That's a very good point. What do you have to say, Sam, about that?
I appreciate the PTSD, the preferred system of healthcare. I think simple, since I'm the last one here, I would say start with the patient experience and the provider experience, because that will create the data flow. Adoption to innovation, and innovation leads back to the outcome. So start with the patient and provider experience. That's how I would say.
Wonderful. Thank you for that very